All right, starting over again. Everyone might have seen a strange announcement a few moments ago from a different link, but now we are in the right section right now. So thank you, everyone, for coming. We're going to be talking about the exciting, wonderful topic of bizarre magic tonight. We're going to wait for Vlad to jump in with us.
One more guest arriving.
Yeah. There we go.
Bloop.
Paul, is that you or David?
It's not me going bloop.
I don't know.
I think it's Paul.
Yeah, it's probably my computer, but if I mute my computer, I can't hear you.
Don't you have like a do not disturb feature?
Well, that's
silence notifications.
That's literally Facebook notifications. I'll check Facebook now. Problem solved.
Yay. I'm sure this is fascinating to watch.
Yeah, we will be having Vlad in here very soon. All right. Oh, we got people already checking in with us to say hi.
Hey, Lothar.
Yep. Lothar is one of our favorite people. Yep. Cheers, fellows. Thank you very much. Fantastic. All right. Just waiting for our fourth guest, the mysterious vampire that is Vlad, to come in. Oh, there he is.
He's in his box of native earth.
Yeah.
Oh,
all right.
There you go.
All right, we're ready to begin. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for coming here tonight. Vlad, as always, is fashionably right on time. Thank you, Vlad, for being here tonight. And we have let's get him off of here, and there we go. So tonight we have myself, David Parr, Vlad, and Paul Prater discussing the topic of bizarre magic. I'd like to thank everyone for coming here tonight. We're going to be discussing the history, your thoughts on, in this roundtable discussion about the fascinating topic that is bizarre magic. We'll be discussing the history and the contemporary aspects of bizarre magic. And I thank you, everyone, for coming here. Oh, there's our one of our most common and unusual. I'm just kidding. One of our favorite people, Stephanie, is here tonight to say hi to us. She shows up for all this stuff. Thank you so much. So thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. And we're going to get off with a question I've been holding off. I didn't tell you about this earlier. All right. So I can get some honest reactions. And this is I'm not going to give you any sort of anything else other than this. And we'll start with David. All right. So, David, you're going to get the solo treatment here. Or the hold on for a second. There we go. David Parr, what is bizarre magic?
What is bizarre magic? Well, like magic, like the word magic, it's difficult to define. It's a bit elusive. Answers tend to be overly simplistic or overly complex, and so I think bizarre magic, as it was defined initially, when it first emerged as a kind of counterculture, a response to mainstream magic, and attempted to set itself apart from mainstream magic, for instance, by adding a K to it. I think at that point it was magic that had a distinctive occult flavor to it. It was magic that was heavily influenced by H.P. Lovecraft and William Hope Hodgson and pulp magazines from the 1920s and 30s. And so when I first was introduced to it and began reading the work of Tony Andruzzi and Charles Cameron and Doc Shiels, it was very much in that mode. But the thing is, any sort of a movement that begins as a kind of counterculture eventually expands so as more and more people embrace it, and then it sort of enters the mainstream. So I think the definition of bizarre magic has broadened since the days of its inception. And I would say that it's magic that has implications of unseen forces at work. And whatever those may be, they can be well-defined or nebulous. And but the implication is that there are some unseen forces at work behind it. And so that's how I think about bizarre magic. But I'm sure there are as many definitions as there are people.
All right. So next up on our list of performers here, of course, is Vlad. Vlad, same question. What is bizarre magic?
Well, in the old days, the simple explanation would have been magic that's presented as reality, where there is no ta-da. It is all magic as it is. You're experiencing a transformation, or you're experiencing water being changed into wine. It was a strange and unusual thing, with a little dash of H.P. Lovecraft and things like that. That's why I never really felt comfortable with bizarre magic in itself, because the general archetypes of bizarre magic in the beginning were the vampire hunter, which we know is not going to work for me. An arcane professor, a sorcerer. And then those things really fit into my world of magic. So I came up with Gothic magic, which was leaning instead away from Lovecraft and more towards Shelley, Stoker, and Mr. Wilde with Dorian Gray, and all of those things. It was magic, eerie, atmospheric, where you didn't have to explain it; it just was.
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Paul, you're up.
All right. So my answer is it probably is overly simplistic, as David said. To me, it's just magic that evokes some type of emotion, typically those associated with, yes, creepy or scary or fear or sadness. Also think, to me, bizarre magic underneath at least has some aspect of it that makes you wonder whether that was just a magic trick or whether it was real. And of course, the theatrical storytelling aspect, I think, is really a key hallmark of bizarre magic. So that's my short answer.
Yeah, I would agree that a strong narrative element is important.
Right.
Theatricality and a narrative, a story aspect, of course. All those things are, when I think of bizarre magic specifically, it's about uniqueness. About being different to some degree. And what I mean by that, of course, is that a lot of mainstream magic is, you can see a lot of magicians perform basically the same things. And a bizarre magician might have a completely unique, original, and different show. And it doesn't necessarily mean it has to be spooky or horror. Or I hate hearing bizarre magic referred to as horror. It's got blood and guts and that sort of thing. It's not something that I really haven't seen too much bizarre magic that has blood and guts in it. I mean, there's certainly some of it, of course, but it's not something that's for some reason that comes up sometimes when
you've done it.
Yeah, but you're okay with it. I mean, that makes sense. But so the next question is we'll start with Vlad this time. Is does bizarre magic have to be spooky?
I think everybody has to answer that for themselves. For me, having gotten into magic through haunted houses and haunted attractions, that was what sort of was my foundation. So when I decided to create Gothic magic, it had to, of course, incorporate horror and all of the other haunted, spooky things, because a vampire is comfortable within that genre and that thought process. For me, it's going to have some kind of spooky or sorrow or something else. You don't find, I'm not going to do happy, love story things unless everyone dies. That's just the way it is. But, for me, yes, it has to have some kind of terror, eerie, melancholy thing to it for me to be attracted to it. It's just sort of, that's where my love of the art lies, is in bringing about the taste of fear, where, everyone sort of has that, I don't know if I really want to go out after seeing that. So it has to be spooky.
It has to be spooky. So, David, how about you next for this question?
I don't think it has to be spooky. Again, I mean, as Vlad said, I think you have to answer these questions for yourself. So for me, I don't think it has to be spooky. I think it should be weird. It should occasionally be disturbing. But my work tends to be, if asked to describe it, the tone of my work, I would describe it as playfully macabre. And the image in my head all along has been Vincent Price in those old Roger Corman movies I watched on Saturday afternoon TV when I was a kid. And in those movies, he's doing horrible things, but there was always a twinkle in his eye that indicated that this was make-believe, that this was play. And to me, the playful aspect of the darker side of Magick is what's attracted me all along. And so it can be spooky, it can be disturbing, but I don't think it always has to be. But I think it has to be weird in some way, That
makes sense. And I'm going to leave it in this format right here so we can all react to comments and that sort of thing. Paul, what is your response to? Do you think Bizarre Magick has to be spooky?
No, I don't think it has to be spooky. I largely agree with what David said, and I feel like part of it for me early on when I started working with a Bizarre Magick, I started thinking about what kind of character would I do or who would I be. And I realized that while I've done some theater, I don't consider acting my strong point. So I'm just kind of me on stage, and me is not this spooky, creepy guy. So I had to really adapt those things. I mean, there are things that I love. That's true about me. I love spooky, creepy, weird stuff. So my stuff it's somewhat like David. I think it's I don't know, like a Southern gentleman telling you this spooky, creepy tale or something like that. That's really the kind of things I like. I've been working on this thing about all these cuddly koalas that all die in a fire, but I thought that's too recent. So, but no, I don't think it all has to be. I'm drawn to that because I love that kind of stuff. But I do.
But this is one of the things I appreciate about your work, Paul, is that you're not affecting a spooky persona when you're on stage. You're a dude. The guy I see on stage is the same guy I know and am friends with,
right?
And complete with the accent and everything. Right. You're not like erasing your regional accent or anything like that. And I think there's something disarming about that,
right?
Because I trust you. You're a real person.
Right.
You're nothing about you is a put on. And I think that's really disarming. It makes us trust you.
He doesn't trust me, he trusts him.
Yeah. You're the opposite, Vlad.
Yeah. And I've commented to Vlad that I love watching him, how, we've all seen him on stage take one step closer and the person takes one step
They're
further.
wary. Right. Exactly. It's coming at the game from the opposite end.
Mm-hmm.
So And that's the wonderful thing about this, is there's so many, even within this subgenre, there's such a variety of approaches to it.
Right.
That's what makes it fun.
Yeah, I agree.
See, I always saw Vincent Price more as, like, when I watched him, as he was enjoying. It wasn't that it was all make believe, that he was actually enjoying the torment.
Yes. No, he was a really nice guy. I remember seeing interviews with him and him being like a super nice guy. Vince, you came very close to meeting him.
Yep. Oh yeah. There's a restaurant in Baltimore called Bertha's Mussels, and it's owned by a British. You've been there, Paul.
I have.
Yep. And there's a British immigrant who owned it, and
it's still there.
Yeah, it's still there. Yep. You can go there. Yeah, they have vegan food there too.
Oh, yay!
So mostly it's a seafood restaurant though. So I used to do underground bizarre magic and seance shows in a art studio they had on the second floor. And Vincent Price was there, and I got a call from one of the staff that I'm not sure if the owner told him to call, but the staff member called me and said, Vincent Price is here. And there's a picture. When you go there's a picture of him at the restaurant. They took a photograph and had him autograph it.
Well, he was well known to be a gourmet.
Yeah, he was a big art collector. So I got there as fast as I could, but it wasn't quite fast enough, and I missed him by 10 minutes. He was already on his way out, but it was so cool that he was there. But yeah, but Vincent Price hung out at the same place I did seances and bizarre magic shows, so
which is pretty cool.
Yeah, so. Yeah, thank you for reminding me to tell that story. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
He came to see your show. He was just there on the wrong night.
That's what it was. Absolutely. They told him about there's a guy that does tours and seances and magic shows here, and he thought that was really interesting, but and I think that might have been the motivation to call me in the first place.
That might have been his motivation to leave.
Yeah.
Post haste.
Well, from everything I've heard about him, he never got tired of talking about horror and it's like some people get tired. It's like work at some point, but he never got tired of talking it. He recognized that this is what I'm known for. Yeah,
and embraced it rather than resenting it.
Yeah, exactly. All the way up until Edward Scissorhands.
Like John Aston was comfortable being Gomez and things, but Fred Gwynn was like, I don't want to talk about being Herman.
Being Herman Munster, yeah. No, because there were points when actors felt like they got typecast and that it ruined their career. Mm-hmm. And but Vincent Price was famous for never saying no to a gig.
Yeah, back in the days, like John Carradine. It was like all of that stuff. Just no matter what, it's a paycheck, and
right. And you never knew when another gig was going to come, so it was like, of course, you said yes. Mm-hmm. And so this is how he ended up doing stuff like the hilarious House of Frightenstein. Mm-hmm. The kids show I saw when I was young, because he wouldn't turn something like that down.
Yeah, Boris Karloff was another one who eventually embraced, his horror background and that sort of thing. Just kind of resigned himself to that, but also had fun with it. I think a lot of those old horror actors did eventually.
Yeah, I mean, he basically said that if it weren't for the creature, he wouldn't have had a career. Mm-hmm. Because he up to that point he was in bit roles. He had been laboring away in relative obscurity until that role came along and made him world famous. Mm-hmm. It's you either embrace that and say, well, I'm really lucky, or you resent it and fight against it the rest of your life. And one path seems healthier than the other.
I mean, a lot of them came back and revisited those things in like things like the Night Gallery. You know, they're like, well, we don't want to do a horror movie, but we'll do something strange and unusual.
Yeah. I remember watching Night Gallery when I was a kid, and it absolutely freaking me out. Yeah, sometimes I'd have to turn it off because it was too scary. It's ironic considering where I ended up, but I was a real scaredy pants when I was a kid.
You heard we had cookies, so you came to the dark side.
Yeah.
Lothar literally likes everything we're doing apparently so far. So
We're good.
yeah.
Huzzah!
So Paul, same. So what do you think about the? The next question is for you.
Okay.
First is, do you think bizarre can be mainstream?
Yeah, absolutely. I think bizarre can be mainstream. I mean, are horror movies mainstream? Is horror literature mainstream? Of course it is. I mean, so yeah, I think it can absolutely be mainstream. And I mean, to me, it holds a lot more inherent interest than a straightforward magic show. So yeah, I absolutely believe that, especially if you come from the perspective that this is about telling stories and drawing people into a world, then yeah, I mean, storytelling is the base of all entertainment. So absolutely, I think it can be mainstream.
Vlad, same question.
Well, I think, I mean, when we look at it, I'm going to use my example with the horror. I mean, Dracula is one of the only books that has never gone out of print. And if we all remember the days of Blockbuster, what section of the movies was most sold out when you went in on a Friday night looking to see what was in? All of the horror films were gone. In 16 candles, there were 18 copies. So I think it's dependent on how it's presented. It's an experience. I mean, even haunted attractions now are sort of going with, well, this is an immersive experience. It's like they're going to try and bring, and that was what I always tried to do was, not necessarily, I wanted there to be peaks and valleys where there was spooky, but there's some macabre humor in there too. But I wanted people to sort of feel like they were living a horror film. And it might be the Addams Family one time, and it might be Texas Chainsaw the next. But I wanted them to get an experience that they couldn't get somewhere else.
David, same question.
I agree with Paul very much so. In fact, I think bizarre magic has entered the mainstream, and it has had an effect, an influence on mainstream magic. I can see it. I mean, part of the credit goes to changes in our culture. In a post Harry Potter world, that those books painted a very vivid picture of what magic looks like and feels like. And so the Mandrake the magician with his top hat and his tailcoat and his cane was no longer the popular image of the magician anymore. The popular image of the magician was a wizard. It was Dumbledore, right? So that changes things. I think it makes it more acceptable to be a little weirder. In fact, I think audiences kind of expect magic to be a bit weird now. And so I think this is exemplary of just about every countercultural movement within art. It starts as this response to whatever it's happening in the larger culture, and then eventually it expands and it enters the mainstream where it can influence more and more people. And I think that's what's happened.
Yeah, I agree. You're seeing it on populist magic TV shows right now. It's on AGT and BGT, on Masters of Illusion, Penn and Teller Fullis. In every country that has variations on these shows also has been featuring more and more bizarre magic.
And I've noticed it affect the language out there. I've heard non-magicians use phrases like, I love close-up magic.
Mhm.
Now, when I was a kid, no one but a magician would use the phrase close-up magic. No one would know what that meant. And but I hear people saying that, and I even hear people saying, non-magicians saying, I like bizarre magic. They've used that phrase, bizarre magic. So the fact that that has even entered the public lexicon is an indication of how much that has entered the mainstream.
Yeah, and I want to mention, by the way, for those who are, I saw a recent comment on in a Bizarre Magic group, like when I posted this, it said David Parr, question mark. David has been to every invocational. So let me point that out. When you don't understand his influence in Bizarre Magic, and he often brings spooky stuff into his magic shows, although they do, can easily be mainstream as well.
Sure,
I
I've
want to point that out.
always felt comfortable straddling both of those worlds because, categories and borders are useful for like catalogs and discussions, but I think they're useless and even counterproductive as an artist from an artistic point of view. I don't want borders and avenues closed off for exploration to me. In fact, I think the most interesting art comes from creative cross-pollination across genres, that mashups of ideas. That's
your stuff
interesting stuff happens.
Criticism in it too.
What's that?
I said a lot of your stuff has sort of a witty social criticism in it too.
Well, you think so?
Yeah. It's sort of like your commentaries, like with Dinner with the Borgias.
Oh, sure. Okay.
It's like sort of like classic, like sort of French literature where you're commenting on society and things.
That's interesting. I've not ever thought of it from that point of view, but that's a valid point.
Yeah,
for sure.
We're going to start the next question with Paul, but there's a good segue here for that. And it's Damien Mundane here says, it's been mainstream since the golden age of magic. Thurston, Keller, Houdini, Alexander, all bizarre magicians. I 100% agree with that.
Yeah, particularly Thurston, who was literally a mystic. I mean, if you read the Steinmeier's book about him, this guy was really a believer in some sort of supernatural stuff. I mean, so and that influenced his work. If you've ever read the speech he would recite to the audience as during the Keller Levitation, well, what's called the Keller Levitation, the masculine levitation. It was this mystical thing, and it's really quite amazing. I mean, it's proto bizarre magic, no doubt about it.
All right, thank you, David. And although the question was targeted at Paul.
Oh, okay.
But I don't think you asked the question yet.
I said,
what is the question?
Yeah. So, I didn't get around to that yet.
Oops.
But so, what are your thoughts on classic magicians of old?
Okay.
So the golden age of magic basically is the 1800s into the early 20th century. We'll give you that much of a grace period. So what are your thoughts on these magicians? And I'm sure you've studied the history and and how they've gotten their started and how it's been influenced, going all the way back to Mesmer through spiritualism and so on and so forth. So what do you think of what influences you have had from there, and what are your opinions on those classic magicians in regards to bizarre magic today?
Well, I mean, I agree with the comment Damien said, and as David was expounding on too, I do believe that was bizarre magic. Think about all the images of demons and devils and the like on the posters. I mean, man, you do that today and people lose their minds, especially if they have an R beside their political party. And I don't care if I offend anyone with that. But I mean, obviously that's where it started. And in some ways I'm envious that they could do what they did then. I think nowadays we have MTV generation, just using that term generically, because I don't know that anyone watches MTV anymore, but short, quick, YouTube generation now, maybe that's more apt. So the idea, as we discussed just briefly the other night, of doing like a 4-hour long show, that's nuts. You couldn't do that nowadays. And I was going to say in those times, maybe people weren't quite as sophisticated and you could dupe people easier. And that's why some of this stuff worked. But I don't believe that. I think people are maybe dumber now than they ever have been, unfortunately, as the world moves forward, because there's more access to dumb stuff online, So I feel like people are really dumber with technology instead of smarter. No, I think obviously I'm envious of what they could do. And how hard is it nowadays to find magicians who can truly make, a lot of money and be really well known and famous all over the world. We just, with all of the technology we have and all of the ability we have, it seems like still it may have been easier then to make a solid living and to really make an impact and do something that was, turn out hundreds or if not thousands of people coming out to a show in a night. So, in a way, I'll also know that I'm getting up on my old man soapbox with that stuff. As I get older, I realize that I'm like, these damn kids and their cell phones or whatever. But
stay off of my lawn.
Right.
Stay off of Paul's lawn.
My driveway is like this. If they want to try to come on my lawn, have fun. They'll roll down anyway. But yeah, in a way, I have a little bit of like, I don't know. I wish I could be there in a time that obviously I never knew. I guess everything's romanticized in the past. Make magic great again. I was with my dad all day long today, and he's a Republican, so that's where all that's coming from.
Paul's working something out right now.
Don't hold back, Paul. It's okay. We're all here to give you a virtual hug.
Well, obviously,
hugs, puppies, and rainbows, Paul.
There we go.
I think I answered the question there.
All right. So, Vlad, same question.
He's asked to take a sip of blood.
I wasn't a big fan of Merlin. He always just bored me. He was 20 minutes of dialogue and a self-working trick, but it's just I think part of it was they weren't bombarded with so many choices. Now we have 6 million channels. You can watch any series that you could think of by finding it. It's like you go, I like this obscure TV show that only had one season and showed in downtown Wichita, at 3:00 in the morning, and somebody goes, yeah, it's on Tubi. So you can find these things. Back then, you didn't have television. You had to go to live theater to be entertained or find a street performer. So when you got to see something, it was a grand experience. And, the seance things that happened in people's living rooms, or drawing rooms, were only usually attended by the very wealthy, that had the money to bring someone in to be able to achieve that. So I think we're sort of running into a cross culture now where we're competing against Disney and the Mandalorian. So we have to give somebody something so unique that they choose to watch us over Baby Yoda. And for some people, that's a hard decision. So once you have a pocket full of frogs, then, might not be so bad. But, so we have to realize we're competing against theme parks, during October, haunted attractions. That's why Doc Hilford used to say, you're crazy if you do a seance in October, because there are so many other things going on. It's sort of, if you want to do a seance, do it in September. Don't bother doing it in October, except for it's already like pre-publicized for you, and you don't have to spend as much money on advertising. But
I can see a handful of arguments against that point of view. So, yeah.
But I would argue that seances work any time of the year versus just October.
Sure. Yeah.
And it's just sort of like, I don't know, it's almost, if you're just doing it in October, I know somebody's going to throw up their fists and scream at me. But if you're just doing seances in October, you're sort of lazy.
Thanks, Vlad. Thanks a lot, dude.
You do
Appreciate the support and encouragement.
You do stuff every single day of the year. You're willing to work for it. Like other people pop up and they're like, oh, I do shows that are spooky in October. Yeah, well, some of us do them year round. I mean, your stuff would work on Valentine's Day or anywhere else. So it's not just an October thing.
True.
True.
Yeah, it's true. Like mainstream magicians suddenly care about bizarre magic in October, around that time. Yeah, that's fair. Now we do have an interesting question, and I want to direct this I want to start this with Paul again, because I think this is right up his alley.
Oh wow, yeah, dude.
All right, let me read this. Okay, I read it, but I'm reading it carefully now.
I'll read it out loud. Relating to the historic magic question, what are your thoughts on whether the satanic panic, moral panic of the 80s affected bizarre magic?
I mean, to start out to answer that question, I have to say I was not involved in bizarre magic in the 80s because I was either a child or a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
So I can only answer that through looking back at history and looking at the writings that I've seen. I haven't seen that satanic panic really in the 80s during that time changed it. But of course, that's something I love to talk about and use that as a framework for the stuff I do. And Cody, part of that for me is, if you don't know where I live in Little Rock, and the West Memphis 3, we're in West Memphis. And if you don't know who they are, just Google it. You'll spend forever going down a rabbit hole.
The Paradise Lost movies.
Right. And that's, 2 hours from where I live. West Memphis is in Arkansas, not Tennessee, contrary to what a lot of people think. And these guys were my age. And in fact, the attorneys who freed them, I'm also an attorney. I know them. So I have a close connection with all of this. Plus, I love heavy metal music. And my dad's a Baptist preacher, so heavy metal was evil. And, another thing that, I loved when I was a teenager that I couldn't do, but I can now, is play my D&D. And, all of this stuff was evil back then. And so, yeah, I love that as a framework. So I don't know if it affected bizarre magic, but I think it certainly affected a lot of people. It did me. It
certainly affected you.
Yeah. Well, having super religious parents, it scared the shit out of me, because
tell them about your seance.
Yeah. So I did one that was heavy metal seance, and that was the entire framework. And I made up a story kind of, based on bits and pieces of fact about a young teenager who was found perhaps dead, or not dead, for sure dead, perhaps murdered, or maybe it was suicide in the backstage dressing room of one of these satanic metal bands. And our whole point in the seance was to summon his spirit and see whether it was actually murder or suicide. And I mean, I had a friend in metal bands write me music for it. And I mean, we
made posters for this fictional band.
Oh yeah, I had
photos.
Yeah, glossies, newspaper articles about the whole thing. Yeah, I did a whole thing based around that was a seance. But the fun part of it is, like, the first third of it was just almost like a historical lecture, but it had video clips and music and all of this for the people who didn't grow up in the 80s to really understand how real this was. I mean, because to a lot of people, it was very real.
Yeah. Yeah. I saw your presentation on that at ECSS, and it was fantastic.
It's up on YouTube if anyone wants to watch it. If you've not had enough screen time tonight, you can feel free to hop on and watch that lecture.
Yeah, it's super cool. And it's you took all the stuff that's usually steeped in Victoriana,
right,
and you recontextualized it for the 1980s, and it changed the game, which is very, very clever.
And I got to dress like I do half the time and wear a
Yeah,
shirt
and look the way you do.
And I did, the fun thing too is I did it in a metal club. It was actually the first place I ever played a show with my band back when I was 16. So that was really kind of fun to get to perform it in that venue. But I did perform it too as a straight show, not as a magic show or anything else. I didn't market it that way. And even my flyers were like black and white photocopies, like we used to do our flyers for band shows back in the 80s. And I stuck them all over the club. And I didn't do anything on the stage because I didn't want it to look like a show. I was down on the ground. And so I really had a lot of fun with that.
We're going to book you as opening up for Slayer.
I would love it. That's my favorite band.
You'd be like,
I thought it was Ghost.
show.
No, I love Ghost too. It's a hard call. Okay, Slayer's my favorite old metal band. Ghost is my favorite new, I wouldn't even call them metal, hard rock band. How about that?
I've just discovered them recently.
People are trying to go, well, they're pseudo goth, and I'm like, no, not really.
I'm like, why did I not tune into this band sooner?
It's like 80s hair metal, but with fully costumed, over the top, goofiness. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's really clever and fun.
Yeah.
Subversive.
For those who are watching on YouTube and the Facebook channels, I did put a link in the chats for Paul's Satanic Panic heavy metal seance, which he performed at Poe's Magic as well.
I did.
Yep.
Not quite the same as a metal club, but I still had fun doing it.
Yeah.
Oh, the other just fun little fact I like to throw out, when I got to that club to do the show, I realized I didn't bring candle holders for my candles. So I got PBR bottles and stuck the candles in PBR bottles. Because, I mean, what better?
And that's the kind of can-do spirit we come to expect from Paul Prater.
And I know one person listening on here was there that night when I did that heavy metal seance at Vino's. So, hey, Joe.
So Rick Bruce just wanted to let us know that in 2003 he received a 30-page screed describing. Screed is a word you don't hear often enough. How in my wizard shop glorified Satan. That's something to be proud of.
Yeah, one other thing I try to do tying in with all of this, I've got another guy here in Little Rock who he knows a lot about mentalism and he's actually good, but he doesn't perform a whole lot. And his dad has a Pentecostal church. And I tried to get him to bring his parishioners out there to boycott the show. I thought that would be great press. But
drum up some publicity.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
He wouldn't do it, though. He thought that was going to
Oh.
That's very castle of you.
my hippity hop demon routine recently got me called. You saw that. Hippity hop demon routine recently got me called Obama in TikTok for some reason. They're like, the only negative response I got was, "Are you Obama?" That was their response. So
that's a weird one.
That was a weird one.
I blame public education.
So I'm going to shoot this one at Vlad to start off with. Saul Ravencroft has a question. Yep.
Do you want me to answer that question?
Yeah.
I don't
I
know.
think vanilla in the sense that how do you combat mainstream magic to be weird? How can you be successful at bizarre magic all year long? Which is a question I had planned on eventually getting to.
I mean, I don't do any other magic. This is what I do year round. I don't, once I've sort of painted myself into my own self-imposed box, and I do Gothic magic. I have several different shows that are built around themes, but I don't do a mentalism show. You're getting Gothic magic, whether it's the serial killer show, it's the ghost children show, it's all going to be Gothic magic. So it's all going to be strange and unusual. It's sort of like if you go into Starbucks, you're going to get coffee. You might argue you don't like their coffee. It's horrible. It's American stuff. You have to get an Americano, whatever you'd like to do. But, you're getting coffee. So when you come to see my show, you know what you're going to get. You might not know what volume of the cereal you're going to get, but you know what style of magic you're going to get. So just like the Addams Family, I myself am strange and unusual. So,
Yeah.
you know, it's always going to be weird.
Yeah, Vlad, the Starbucks of dead children. So, Paul,
Lydia Dietz again.
Up the dam.
so Paul, same question.
So I don't know if I'm the best one to address that unless you're talking strictly performance. I'm sorry. I took it as just in everyday life. I was going to say I have to walk that line all the time. I flip-flop because obviously the law thing. With Magick, I mean, I do have like corporate straightforward mentalism shows, but a lot of them are actually the same routines I do in the bizarre magic shows with just toned down a little bit. You know, you can still use tarot cards as long as you're doing it in a fun way. So then it's not scary anymore, you know, because there are people who, especially I'm in the South, people get weirded out about that kind of stuff sometimes. So for instance, I'll always say, do you have any problem touching tarot cards? And usually when I say, hey, do you have any problem touching these? People are like, no, even if they really do, because I'm making it playful and kind of like they're going to look a little silly if they go, yeah, those are evil. So for me, it's similar to Vlad's answer. I do the kind of stuff I do all the time because I think it does fit with me, my character, and who I am as an actual person. But I don't tone down too much when I do the corporate shows. It's just repackaging the material in a more non-offensive format.
So now if they told me they had a problem touching them because they were evil, I'd say, well, then touch them twice.
I think maybe once ever I've had someone say, no, I can't touch those. And here's the reason why I say it's different, because I do ghost tours, as most of you guys probably know, but I do ones called Booze and Brews where I'm doing seance work. And I don't say it as magic. I don't market myself as a magician. The tickets don't come through my performing website. So a lot of people there do believe that what they're seeing is real. And in that situation, a lot of people won't touch tarot cards. It's very interesting seeing just that the way I approach it as this is a serious thing makes them fearful of it.
Well, context is key. Context can change the game.
Sure. But yeah, doing like corporate style stuff, I've never had anyone have any issues with tarot cards. So,
and I think one of the things that helps too is like you know, Paul and David and Vince and I and many others have gotten to do shows in historical places or not normal performance venues, which takes it out of the staged atmosphere and brings a different reality to it. You know, when people aren't expecting it to be a what row am I sitting in scenario.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. You know, when I started searching for a place for my Halloween show, I just thought, what's the ideal? And the ideal to me was a place where people experienced an otherworldly atmosphere before the show even started. And the place I found was a mansion that's now a museum just outside the city of Chicago. And so they start to experience a sort of otherworldly atmosphere as they're walking up the path toward the house, because it's this gorgeous old chateau-esque mansion right on the lake, north of the city of Chicago. And it just seems like, well, something supernatural could happen here.
Right.
and the show hasn't even begun.
Is that the one place? Where was the place you were at where you had the red ball come down the steps?
That's it.
That's it? That's what it was? Okay.
Yeah. That's the Evanston History Center at the Charles Gates Dawes house, outside of Chicago. I did my Halloween show there a number of years. And you can't manufacture atmosphere like that. It's already built in. It's there already. And so by the time the show started, the audience was already in the frame of mind that something spooky or supernatural could happen. And I didn't have to work to get them there.
Yeah, when Vince had me come up to the Lord Baltimore and did ghost tours that were, legit, like ghost hunts, I should say, rather. And afterwards there was a seance that was, again, this is with any performance I do. I don't disclaim, I don't claim. People take it as they want. But
sure, let people figure it out for themselves.
Right. But we did, I had a relatively small group, and when I did the seance portion, at one point, I got the name and relationship to a woman of someone who had passed, and she started crying. Now, I don't want people to cry. It's pretty awesome, for yourself to be able to go, that I can't believe I got that much emotion. But, I don't want that to happen. But there was a lady at the table who she went, all right, you can stop. And I went, what are you talking about? She goes, this is all fake. She's in on it. And I'm like, this woman's crying. You think I'm in on it? And then that woman's, I've never met this guy. I don't know him. So it's interesting to see that those people who believe and those people who don't, and how they work together or against each other.
In context, that happened right after a ghost tour of the hotel. Right after a psychological seance, ungimmicked.
Right.
Which I hosted. And, so they were going from that directly into Paul's show. And it was like, he said it was like the first and only time that it ever happened to him, I think, right?
Yeah, where somebody's crying. I mean, I've had people cry, but not like that. I've had tears, but that's different than crying. This woman was crying.
Yeah,
I've never performed that particular piece done that way ever again. That was more than I wanted. I don't want that kind of reaction.
But sometimes, the fact is, if you're opening those doors into dark territory, you can never tell quite how people are going to respond. I mean, occasionally you're going to get a lot of responses you could probably predict, but occasionally you're going to get responses that you couldn't have predicted.
Yeah.
And that's, when you're entering scary territory, dark territory, that's going to happen, and you have to be prepared.
Well, I think that tied in. Go ahead.
I put that part in there when I did your Fallen Angels.
Yeah.
I put that moment in there, and I told people at the ECSS, I'm like, we're going to be doing something that deals with children dying, being burned to death. If this topic is going to be too much for some of you, then you have my permission to leave. And I gave them that sort of like, this is your chance to leave the car if you want, because we're going to be talking about some dark stuff. And if you don't want to deal with roasted children, then now's your time to go.
And you had some people leave.
Yeah. And I was
and that's fair, to give them an out. That there's no judgment about it. If you can't handle this, then that's the better option. Yeah.
You have to be self-aware enough to know, to be able to put that in there. Because some people would just be like, oh, I'm going to do it. I don't really believe in the routine because I know it's make-believe, and they're not going to understand how drama and theater works for some people. So you have to be self-aware as a performer enough to be able to look at, and I don't want to use the term, but the humanity of the moment, and give them that escape clause.
Well, and what you said is why I didn't go with some kind of character-driven something. I don't feel like that's my strong suit, so I was just going to be me.
Yeah.
It was wise, really wise, because that works in your favor.
Yeah, the only time it works for me is if I put on a wig and glasses and take on some ridiculous persona. But otherwise, you can't do it.
I've seen you do that, and it's funny.
Yeah. With a vibrating wand.
Yeah.
I think, again, only one other person, maybe on this, aside from you guys on here, has seen that as well, and that's Joe, who I know is here from Arkansas watching. He's seen that character a few times.
Well, there's a few people in here who saw you dress up for me that one East Coast Spirit Sessions. That was my favorite, of course.
Yeah.
Maybe we won't talk about that one on this particular live stream.
That is for the initiated.
That's right. You had to be initiated.
Before tonight's discussion, I ran across an envelope that I found photographs in. And as I was digging through them, and this was just minutes before we logged in, I found some photos from the old invocational convention. And so I'm gonna show you some of these. This is the invocational conventions from the 1980s in Chicago. This is Ross Johnson and Tony Andruzzi. I believe Ross is
spotlight you for this one.
Yeah, digging into an envelope full of tickets for a raffle. There, Tony would raffle off different stuff. His books sometimes. I actually once won a severed head, like a latex severed head, in one of those raffles. And this is Tony and Gloria having a good time. This was, the invocational conventions were Tony's party. It was a bit like it was less like a magic convention and more like a bacchanal. So there's that. And then this is a photo. That is my friend John Hewitt, who was the person who dragged me to the first invocational convention. At that point, I was doing magic in comedy clubs, and I wasn't into the bizarre realm, but I went anyway. It looks like we are examining a Duncan yo-yo. I don't know why we're looking at it so intently like that. But yeah, it was just so strange that I ran across these photos right before we logged in.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah. You don't remember that specific memory from 30 years ago?
The yo-yo?
Yeah.
No, I have no idea what was happening there.
It's going to be on eBay soon.
Yeah.
So let's we'll start with Vlad on this one. Who influenced you when it came to bizarre magic? Who was your biggest influences?
I mean, my first influences, because I didn't come into magic through magic, I came in through horror and the haunted attraction thing. So Vincent Price, Alice Cooper, I mean, those were people who influenced me, Lugosi, things like that. And then later on, I mean, when I first got into magic, my first person that I came in contact with was Jeff Fry. That was the first magician that I met, because he knew someone from the haunted house. And he said, "Oh, I think you need to meet this guy." And I talked to Jeff, and Jeff is like, "Well, yeah, it sounds like you might actually make a good magician." And I said to him, I said, "Well, don't you have to be sort of the seventh son of the seventh son, or they bring you out to the sacred grove by candlelight?" And he started laughing, and he goes, "I wish it was like that." And I'm like, "Well, it sounds like AA, doesn't it?" And he goes, "Yeah, it's sort of like that, but with less donuts." And I'm like, okay.
With worse coffee, yeah, and fewer donuts.
So I asked that every single one of the people that I came in contact with, how can I blend horror with magic, and is there such a thing? And they all kept going, because these are older magicians, and they all went, "Oh, you want mentalism?" And I go, no, isn't there anything with horror? And they go, "No, there's nothing like that." And I'm like, "Well, what?" And then one guy goes, "Well, you sort of sound like you're talking about Dr. Jax, because he had this little book and he would tell stories and things out of this little book." And I go, "Very close to what I'm looking for." And they said, "Well, maybe animate, because he has some of these things." And I go, "Sort of close too." And I go, "But where's the horror?" And they go, "No." And then there used to be a gentleman named George Daly. They used to bring around stuff to the different magic conventions and sell magic books. And I came across, when it first came out, Eugene's Spirit Theater. And I was like, this is exactly what I've been looking for. Why don't you people know of this? And they're like, "Well, because it's sort of a new thing and nobody's doing it really." They didn't know anything about the invocations or anything else, because they were sort of underground. So I had to sort of jump in at that level and then backtrack. And then Jeff came to me and he goes, "Oh, I'm trying this in sort of a by invitation only thing, and it's going to be called Mystery School, and I want you to be involved in it." And I'm like, "Okay." And he goes, "Yeah, there's going to be all these people, Mundaka and Vito Lupo and Eugene Berger and Bob Neal and Max Maven." And I go, "Okay, I sort of have heard of those names." I'm like, "But Jeff, you realize I've only been in Magic for like a year." And he goes, "No, it's going to be a good experience for you." So I was at the first, and before the first Mystery School, I was at the invitation only one. So that was like, I sort of, those as mentors. I had, Max and Eugene and Jeff and Bob Fitch and all of those people. So I sort of got tutelage from those, without actually studying Houdini and like going through the learning from kids' tricks. I jumped in from a haunter and became a magician, and then had to learn all of the magic stuff that related to what I wanted to do. I didn't like alter kids' knowledge. I had to backtrack and learn all of the stuff to match what I wanted to do.
All right, David. I'm sorry, Paul. We'll get same question.
So the thing that first got me in the bizarre magic world really was, I liked magic when I was a kid. I got out of it for a long time. I still every now and then would perform it at like a talent show or something, but the mentalism always appealed to me. But I always had the issue with mentalism often being either process heavy or boring, or look at how special I am and you're not. And those are the things that didn't appeal to me about it. And honestly, what I found first, it was when I got back into magic, I found Doc Hilford's stuff. And a lot of that, I realized, hey, there's interesting, different presentational angles I really like here, and just dove in. A lot of the things, as far as what influenced me or what I really loved, are like The Garden of the Strange by Caleb Strange. I still tell people that's one of my favorite books. I don't think that anyone's ever performed a single thing out of there because it's so out there sometimes, or impossible. But man, for things that really lit my imagination, I loved that book. I loved Eugene Points, loved his stuff. Christian Shellman's stuff's phenomenal. And really, honestly, I'm not just saying it because David's on the call, but Brain Food, I love that book. And in fact, I was really excited the first time we met to get David to sign it. I still tell this story every time. I got it secondhand because I think it was out of print at the time. And it had a sticker on it for whatever, the price was. And he drew an arrow to it. It's still in the book. I didn't change it. And he said, hope it was worth it. I never took that sticker off.
That sounds like me.
Yeah.
I was hoping that he would do that werewolf hand thing, but
but all of that stuff is what really kind of got me excited about magic in a way that I think more so than I ever was when I was younger, finding out that there was a different approach. So while I, first got into magic as a kid, I think it was, I really have to credit the bizarre magic for getting me into magic truly.
Mm.
All right, David, same question.
Being that you haven't answered any questions, how about you?
Oh, me?
Yeah.
I was going to say that. I was going to say that after David, but
Okay.
but I'll tell you what first made me realize there was such a thing as bizarre magic. I grew up in Baltimore and near Denny and Lee's, and that was the big magic shop I always went to, and I know a couple of you have been there. I think, yeah. It was the one I went to when I was a kid. I used to walk there. It was about 3 miles from my house. I would walk there.
The one in the strip mall?
Yeah, that's right. Yep, that's it.
Yeah.
That's the one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Next to like a party place sometimes.
Yeah.
Always, some place on that strip mall was always going out of business.
Yeah.
So new next to it. And it was, so I would walk 3 miles to there. And I never quite fit in. And there, because I was a skinny, nerdy kid, which is normal for a magician. But I think what happened was one day, and of course, Denny would mentor people all the time, was known for mentoring young magicians. And I was kind of hoping to be mentored one day. I wanted to be a magician, and I go up to the case, and I'm probably 16 years old at this time, and in the case is Lizzie's hand. For those who don't know, it's an effect where a reaction causes the paper to bleed, and then it restores to. You can use it over and over again. It was a great
bloody handprint appears on a document.
Larry White and Bruce Calver.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep. It was supposedly the admission of guilt of Lizzie Borden.
Wasn't it like a yellowy orange color paper or something like that?
Yeah. Odd paper is the secret. I don't think we're giving anything away with that one. But, but yeah,
and there was a Jack the Ripper version of this as well.
Yep, that's right. Which I made. That was me. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you for that shout out.
Yeah.
Goldenrod paper you can't buy in office supply stores. A little trivia: if you go to the store and you see anything that says Goldenrod, don't buy it at the store. It's not Goldenrod.
It's not the real stuff.
Yeah, because it doesn't recycle. It stains everything orange if you throw it into for paper recycling. So they don't sell it anywhere. You have to buy it from science distributors now, but you still can get it. Anyway, I go into the store and I buy Lizzie's hand one day, and Denny pretty much never talked to me again after that. He's
probably grateful you took it off his hands.
Yeah, he was probably.
That was the extent of it.
He suggested it was ordered by accident. Like, he's like, I don't even know why we have that here. Was this, if I remember the comment correctly? It's like it was clearly he had disdain for it, but I loved it and used that. It came with about 20 sheets, I think, and I used it for years. It just lasted forever. That was a great effect. But yeah, that's how I first found out about it. That really influenced me, the direction I went into, and eventually I got into the paranormal. I did that for a little while, but it really kicked off once again walking into a magic shop in the original Magic warehouse location in Maryland. I stumbled into that magic shop, and on a spinning rack, was a very, very dusty. It had to be only a few years old at the time. Copy of Spirit Theater. And I said, "Oh, is there any more books like this?" And they're like, "No." I was like, "I don't even know what that is." Literally, that was the response. It was wrapped in plastic. It had the plastic record inside of it, and I bought that. And it was, I think, even at the time, and this was the 90s, it was $75 or something like that. They were selling it there.
Yikes.
It wasn't cheap. Yeah, it wasn't cheap.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, but I bought it. That was the only thing I bought that day, but I bought it. Yeah, it wasn't cheap. It might have. I think it might have gone up to 100 shortly thereafter too. But
Gina signed it and with an arrow pointing to the price tag.
Yeah, that's right.
He was hesitant about signing it because he would go, this is going to decrease the value.
It's going to reduce its resale value.
Yeah. Unfortunately, not anymore. But yeah. So I got Spirit Theater, and that kind of pushed me toward doing. My first seances were gimmicked, but as I started to read more about psychological seances, I went in that direction. And I started doing bizarre magic, underground, what it's called underground magic. I didn't know that was called that back then. I found that out later. But underground magic shows, bizarre magic, and seances in Fells Point. And then the internet happened, and I started meeting people like Paul Prater and Vlad. And I mentioned this on Tuesday, but this is the magic number 13. 13 years I've known Paul Prater. This year, yeah. Where you came to my parlor show in Harper's Ferry, West Virginia.
That's right.
Yeah. About the Lizzie's hand, Larry White actually did. Bruce Calver and Larry did a talk at the Inner Circle of Bizarre Magic convention, the Gathering, and Larry actually made up a set of lecture notes that had a bunch of different revisited chemical magic in it. Except he was like, well, this is how it was used to be done, and this is how, as a chemistry teacher, you can do it safely. And he had he actually went the extra step, and he went and made found little samples of the chemicals you would need and stapled them into the lecture notes.
Oh, wow.
Unfortunately, he decided that it was a lot of work to do this, so he only made 10 of them. So now we have a room full of magicians. There's 100 people in the room, and you tell them that there's only 10 available. So it sort of looked like a bride dress, free for all, trying to get to the 10 lecture notes. Right.
So next, that's your David. Who influenced you?
Well, I share some of the Vlad and I grew up in about the same era, so some of those influences, there's some overlap. I mean, my first big rock concert was Alice Cooper, and I knew that there was magic in his show. In fact, his concert was sort of like a big, crazy, lavish magic show.
Yeah.
And then also Vincent Price, big influence. The show Kolchak the Night Stalker, huge influence. So, but then, when I was in my first year of college, I met Eugene Berger, and I think of Eugene as a crossover artist because he was basically doing magic with weird themes, and he was doing it in mainstream contexts. He was performing it in restaurants and in bars and corporate functions and house parties. And one of the criticisms I heard of Bizarre Magic early on was there's no place where you can perform that stuff. And Eugene was the proof that that wasn't true. Because he was performing magic with weird themes, all these places where, most magicians would say that wouldn't fly. And so I watched him do this over and over, venture into, spooky territory or dark territory in the middle of a restaurant and during his set. And, so that was a profound influence because it was just that he was the first magician I'd ever heard talk about magic in theatrical terms. Before then I had never heard a magician use words like script and rehearsal and costume, like all the things that I was familiar with because my background was in theater. I had not heard magicians use those words. And so I think that's part of why Eugene and I hit it off right away was we had a common language. I immediately realized, he's speaking my language. And so, then through Eugene and my friend John, I met people like Tony Andruzzi. I started going to the invocational conventions and Max Maven and Charles Cameron and Stephen Minch and T.A. Waters and all these people who would be names in books otherwise. And at that point I was doing magic in comedy clubs and I was absolutely miserable and I did not enjoy it at all. And by hanging around with Tony, because somehow it sunk into me on an unconscious level, and that was that Tony had been a successful comedy magician. He created the Tom Palmer Comedy Act, which is probably still for sale at Magic Incorporated in Chicago. The manuscript is probably still for sale, and he had been very successful in that realm. And at some point he decided he had reached the end of the path and he didn't want to pursue it anymore. And he left that path and he struck off in this new weird direction and became Masculine New Mage. And so it's sunk in that was possible, that you can leave the path that you're on, the path that was at that time making me miserable, and strike off in a new direction and basically reinvent yourself. And at that point, when I decided to do that, I realized that what had attracted me to magic in the first place was the spookier side of it. Right from the beginning, the first book I ever read about magic was called Spooky Tricks, and it was all magic with a spooky theme. And so in magic at that time, when I was 7 years old, it was all intertwined with my interest in monster movies and special effects makeup and ghost stories and Kolchak the Night Stalker and all that stuff. All that stuff was intertwined.
Yeah.
So it seemed logical for me to like, oh, go back to your roots. That's the direction you should pursue.
Unfortunately, my first magic trick taught me how to lift a sugar cube with a string. It's pretty lame.
Well, that's useful knowledge.
Yeah.
If you're ever in a situation where the only way to be rescued from the jigsaw kill room you're trapped in is to lift a sugar cube with a piece of string.
That's right.
You will escape.
It's in someone's mouth and it has razor blades on the side.
Right, exactly. So you could sleep soundly at night knowing you will survive.
So we have a couple of questions from the peanut gallery. All right. So this is interesting. This might be a couple of minutes. If you had to choose one effect that you do that you feel defines who you are or your characters, what would it be, and does that effect differ from your favorite effect to perform? It's a long question. It actually blocks quite a bit of Vlad and Paul there. It's a long question. Yeah. So it's Paul, you handle it first.
You got to give me a minute to think that one out.
Vlad,
I don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah.
I mean, I think probably the one that defines me would be the death card that I created. I don't know. I love it. It's a signature effect. I do enjoy doing the Countess Bathory more, just because there's more byplay. But I think that, being able to skate the image of giving them a chance to redeem themselves and return to life and either face the consequences of what they've chosen in their life or return back on the gamble defines my character, and the Bathory one is more fun for me to do.
Yep.
I think I've got your answer for you.
Okay.
I think, and it's not one that I came up with, but it's the Cuss cards routine. Alchemy Moon put that out. I love performing that routine because it's creepy, dark stuff, but all done with a lot of fun, humor, and tongue-in-cheek. But also what I love about it is it's different every time. You have to be aware and in the moment when you perform it. It's not a rote, do the same thing every time. So, and I enjoy performing that one a whole lot. So I feel like that kind of encapsulates who I am on stage. You got some dark, creepy stuff, but we're going to have fun with it too.
David, do you have something like that?
Yeah, I would have to say Dinner with the Borgias has become a signature effect. It's also one of the oldest effects in my repertoire. I wrote it in 1996, and I'm still performing it now. It's, of course, gone through quite an evolution over the course of those years, so that it's now different from the original script I wrote in 96. But it's also it has all the elements of the things that I love. It has the history, it has the playfulness, it's somewhat macabre. It's dark but playful. It has all that stuff, and it's also very fun for me to perform because I've been doing it for so long. It's the most lived-in piece of magic that I perform regularly. I feel so at home in that piece that there's no nervousness. There's nothing like that. I've lived there for a couple of decades, and so So now I can just relax when I'm performing that piece and just have fun and focus on having fun with the people who are on stage with me. So if I had to pick one that exemplifies my work and is one of my favorite routines to perform, that would be it.
That's sort of one of my favorite ones that you do.
Mine too. Yeah.
Thank you.
It almost has like, you know, I mean, I might be a little bit off, but it almost has like an Addams Family-esque flair to it.
Well, I think that's an influence too. Yeah, definitely. I remember watching that show when I was a kid, and that, you know, there's an impishness to that show, in the cartoons that were at its foundation, and so that's definitely throughout my work.
Yeah.
So
like with the tray and everything, it's almost like Morticia, like cutting the heads off the roses, you know.
Thank you. That's nice.
I think for me would have to be the and it's a politically incorrect term, but everyone knows Buddha papers as Buddha papers. So, and don't make comments or otherwise you'll have to hear my lecture on political correctness and magic. But
you tried one day to come up with a new name for it.
Yeah. We'll work on it. So Buddha papers
stuck
is a truly underappreciated bit of magic. You know, I think that, you know, when people make what some people refer to as slum or junk drawer magic and that sort of thing, the people who design that stuff, they designed it to be little miracles, bits of wonder, and they have been, you know, just reduced in quality, and
they've been abused.
Yeah,
they've been abused. That the problem is not with the original effect. The original effect is often quite clever. It's just been abused over and over and over.
Right. Hey, I got something in my pocket. Let me show you this. You know, basically. But Buddha papers, I love performing that. I put a lot of energy into it. A few of you have seen me perform that before. I put a lot of energy into making it, you know, a moment of wonder for everyone involved. I want them to really believe it's a miracle, and I break the rules of Buddha papers. I let other people perform it. You know, I say, here, you take this, and we'll go over. Instructions are very clear, and it'd be Oh, Brother Shadow used them. I actually wasn't. I'm not sure if I knew that. Yeah.
Yeah, I told you about that.
Oh, okay. Yeah. But it's that would be my a piece that I think that I'm proud of performing, and I like doing that. It kind of exemplifies what I think of as Janus paper. Someone suggests.
That's an interesting idea.
Yeah, that's not bad. I like that.
I'm kind of digging that one.
Yeah.
Who came up with that? Ariel. Yeah.
I mean, all these things that sort of get thrown into that, like slum magic things. I mean, they were originally like the Svengali deck, you know, and all of these things were designed to encapsulate magic very quickly and be able to make someone sort of at a point of sale. They were like, you know, they were pitch magic. So you had to show them the magic in the most concise matter to be able to make them have a decision that they couldn't leave the store without that.
Yeah, and it had to impress them.
Mm-hmm.
It had to really impress them.
Yeah, you had to get the money from them. So it's like, like this is like the most concise magic we can show you and get your money from you. So.
Right. Because the game is you want to make them think, okay, I cannot leave this store without knowing how that's done.
Yep.
and anyone who visited a magic shop when they were a kid has been through that experience where I can't leave this place without knowing.
Yeah.
All that handled Christopher's question too. What would be your go-to effect? I think we got that covered by segueing from John Gilmore's question. But the next one is any advice and I'd like to start this one off. Any advice on approaching a hotel for a seance show? But my first bit of advice is be careful we're using the word seance, as I've learned over and over again. Like spirit circle, spirit session, it's the same thing, but some people are, because of popular culture, put off by the word seance for whatever reason. It's like that freaks people out, and they think it's in some circles it's not Christian, for example. So if you perform near a Bible Belt, that can come up. It sounds ridiculous, but it's true.
Yeah, I mean, because the irony is that many spiritualist believers were Christians.
Yeah, they invented it pretty much. The whole thing. So
it's so goofy.
Yeah, but if you're going to pitch it to a hotel or a business like that, I tell first of all, it helps if the hotel has a reputation for being haunted, and if they embrace it, better. If they don't, I do the same pitch every single time. I said Scooby and Shaggy are not real people. All right, so they're either going to be like, "Oh, that's awesome, it's haunted," and they're definitely coming now. Or they're gonna be like, I just need a place to stay. I don't believe in ghosts. There's no one who's like not going to hotels because there's a risk of a specter showing up in their bedroom at night.
Wait.
You damn
Scooby and Shaggy aren't real?
Sorry, break it.
But I've lived by their teachings.
He was repainting his mystery
I
wagon.
have written down Janus papers. I think that's a winner.
Yeah, I might put that. I want to put down my notes for my bizarre, strolling bizarre script, which is I write about it in that one.
Credit to Ariel Freilich for that genius idea.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Oh, the Odd Gathering had a contest about this junk magic and amazing things that have been created. I recently started challenging people to come up with magic tricks that cannot be bizarred, for example.
No, I think magicians routinely underestimate the power of simple, straightforward, classic magic effects, because we grew up with them and performed them when we were kids. So it's easy to become kind of jaded about them. But when you look at them from a layperson standpoint, from the standpoint of a person who has no background in magic, that stuff is very, very effective. Yeah. So I think this underestimating it is really a danger that prevents our growth and discovery of new stuff, because it leads to dismissing a lot of classic, simple, straightforward magic, including things that magicians dismiss as self-working, when there's really no such thing as self-working magic. It requires a guiding intelligence behind it, whatever it is,
Or at least
the method.
Yep. It is all about the presentation. That's right. Going back to the topic about presenting a seance or bizarre magic to a hotel. I don't know if he did this by design or it's just coincidence, but one of Eugene's earliest shows was just called Haunted.
Hauntings.
Hauntings. You're right. Yeah, Hauntings. And it was so he had seance aspects in that. But he didn't call it a seance, in the marketing and advertising anyway. So spirit summoning, spirit theater, a paranormal experiences, Clifford had suggested. Those are great ways of, if you're going to propose it to a hotel, that's what your intention is. I would use that kind of terminology. A paranormal experience. Don't use the word seance until they're there. Once they're signed up for it, you can say, like, by the way, just like we're calling it a spirit circle. This is a seance. I've done that lots of times. Does anyone else have any advice on?
Be careful using seance in Salem, because people were in Salem at the time doing regular Wiccan seances. So they were like, you had to make sure that what we were doing was not combined with what the other people were looking for. They're like, oh, we're not going to be meditating and, trying to contact our ancestors. We're like, no, it's not that. So.
Yeah. Now, when I pitched my Halloween show to like museums and historical locations, I did use the word seance, but it was always in the context of this is a theatrical recreation of a Victorian era seance.
Yeah.
And that was the exact sentence I would use. Okay, so it took that word and put it in a theatrical context that changed the game. And so every piece of publicity, the way I described it when I pitched it to them, always contained that verbiage. And that allowed me to contextualize it in a way that made it safe, and made it make believe.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see what else do we have in here. I want to bring that up again because I thought that was funny. I shouldn't try to pitch a demon summoning to a local hotel. Depends on the hotel.
Go for it. Go for it, dude.
The worst thing to say is no. Or
Yeah,
it was live, I guess. I don't know.
The Chelsea Hotel, yeah, I would probably go over. Yeah. Hotel Roosevelt, probably not much, but
How does one pitch a show to any venue? Or you're renting? Renting. Well, I don't know if a lot of us do pitches in this.
I have.
Yeah.
Many times. And
all right, good. Okay, because I certainly have, and you guys know I have. I know Paul has. Vlad, you don't really pitch though, unless it's a pitchfork. Yeah.
Yeah, pitchforks.
But
we had to sell our show to different locations when I was in Salem.
All right.
It was like 10 years up there trying to find a different venue every year. So.
Every show I've done has always been a co-production with somebody else, and it's because I never wanted to be the one who's putting up all the money for it.
Yeah.
And
to answer that question directly, I would say try to avoid four-walling it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Is,
and because
that's the consensus answer from all of us. Don't.
Yeah, I have never done that ever. I've never four-walled a single thing ever.
It's unwise, I think. And that way, if you can find an organization that has a built-in audience or a mailing list and some publicity machine already in place, then you can get help selling your show. And then everybody has a stake in its success.
Now, I will say, being the counter voice, I frequently four-wall in the idea that I'm doing everything, but I still want four-wall as in I'm going to pay you rent and have nothing else to do.
Well, yeah.
But not doing anything out there, black box theaters.
Yeah.
We still work off of ticket splits.
Because 10 years ago in Salem, if we were to rent a location in Salem, it would have cost us $5,000 for a month.
Sure. Yeah.
So it only made sense financially to go in and do a split ticket. Go, you know what? You have the location. All you're responsible for is electric and giving us a roof and a key. You own the location, and you tell us, hopefully we can have a key. So at the end of the night, we can just shut everything down and leave when we're done. But you earn your portion just by having the roof. We will do the publicity. We will do all of the marketing. So that way we have control of all the marketing, and we will roam the streets and advertise and everything else. And you just collect your share.
Yeah.
What
Even the shows I did that were in a theater were co-productions, because I just didn't want to be a faceless guy who hands over a check every month, because then I'm just abandoned to my fate. and the show either tanks or it succeeds.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to be in that position. I wanted help. I wanted to have a team. And so I always made it into a revenue share situation so that everyone would have a stake in its success. And I'd get some help getting the thing off the ground. Because otherwise it's just like you're just the person who hands over a check.
Yeah, especially if you're a struggling magician, you're taking a huge risk. So what Paul was specifically referring to is called two-walling, where you do that's the actual term for it, is when you split the revenue and that sort of thing, and that's so much safer. It's surprising how so many magicians don't figure out this simple equation. Is you can earn more money than a flat rate by doing profit sharing, where you split the revenue with the business. I do, I'll be honest with you, I do a 50% split with a lot of the restaurants and hotels I perform at. I set up annual presentations. I'm there for every Halloween or every or once during the summer or something like that, or several times a year. The DeFibo's restaurant chain in Delaware, I perform at most of the restaurants, and we do a revenue split. The tickets, including dinner, are $75 or more. I get 50% of that, and they fit 100 people in there. So do that math and think about how much money that is.
Exactly.
And there's magicians doing $200 birthday parties.
Yeah,
lucky.
No,
so
I would sometimes use a 50-50 split too, and that was because I knew no one would argue with me. If there's one thing I absolutely hate about the business side of show business, it's haggling about money.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, let's just get past that so I can get to the fun part, which is the show. So I want to just bypass all that. Mm-hmm. So if I just propose we're going to split everything equally, no one's going to argue with that. That's like
you feel like they're not losing money. Like if 2 people show up, then it's a 50% split. But if 100 people show up, even more. Every great once in a while, I've seen someone kind of like hand me that check. They're like, I can't believe you're making this. You're actually technically making more money than we did on this. Because I asked them, I'd say, how much? I'll tell you my proposal. I say, how much is it going to cost you to have the staff there, food there, with a limited menu, and be able to per person who shows up? And they'll say like $35 or $30 per person to justify us being open. I said, all right, well, let's work out $60 a ticket. I get 30. Sometimes I'll reduce it if they kind of have an issue with that, but usually it's half or just shy of half.
Yep.
And I asked, I try to, it's a sliding scale. It's based on how many people can hold that. If a restaurant holds just 10 people, it's usually not worth the effort. If it's a cafe or something like that. But if they seat 75 to 100, then it becomes a better deal. And I've worked out deals with hotels in which I've made $100 for every room they've sold. They'll do a themed evening or themed weekend, and I'll get a cut of every room they sold during that. So they'll sell the package for $300 or $400, and I get $100 out of that.
Yeah, that's very smart.
Yeah, so that one of my biggest profiting events, and the only children's show I do, is at the Marriott Hotel in Delaware, in which I do. First, I did a pirate show, which is a bizarre magic pirate show all the way. I bring the words down a little bit because it's kids. And then the next year I did Fairy Tales to Tell in the Dark, which is a little spookier, and the kids loved it. Their kids are smarter than you give them credit for. But it was the only reason I do these kids shows, is because it pays too well to say no to it. It's, to be honest.
Yeah, no, often I would work it out the arrangement like this. I would just say to the people, once a 50-50 split, offering to do a 50-50 split was often the quickest way to yes. That was the most direct and fast path to them saying yes. And then after that, I would basically say, well, how much money do you want to make? And I'd say, do you want to make 10 grand for the run? Does that sound like what you want? And they'd come up with a figure, and I'd say, okay, let's set the ticket price based on how many seats we have and getting to that goal. And so we'd work out what the ticket price was and how many shows we needed to do for them to reach their goal of whatever it was, 10 grand, 15, whatever the amount was.
And I'll be honest with you, when I hear a magician do a lecture or something like that, and they say, I always want the money up front and I always give them a set price, I don't believe that person. I don't believe it. I think they're lying. I don't care who that is. I think they're either getting money from some other source, or they're which they're not telling you about, like their full-time job or something like that, or because unless they're the Vegas performers or something like that at the bigger hotels, if these are not the most well-known or wealthiest paid magicians, that's probably a lie. They're probably exaggerating. There's a little hyperbole in there.
I mean, I think if you reach a status where your name is well known in the public, you can start demanding a fee, and you're probably going to get it.
Sure, yeah. Those are the exceptions, of course.
Yeah.
But when and no one outside of party magic has ever heard of you, probably not.
Yeah. No, it just again, my approach to negotiating all that stuff was, what's the fastest and most direct path to yes? To remove obstacles and reasons for them to say no.
Yeah.
And that was to make it all seem as fair and like they were dictating the terms as possible. And so how much money do you want to make?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you tell me. And so there's nothing for them to say no to. They're already at yes.
So before we close this evening, I have one more question left. All right, and I'm going to pretense it with this: the bizarre magic just to me always means unique and different. It means if I'm doing a card trick or an imp bottle or Buddha papers or any of the other things I perform, even in strolling magic, it has my own words, pattern, and effect to it. It's a Vince Wilson trick, basically. I think we could all say that in this group. Whatever magic we do, it's a David Parr effect. It's a Vlad effect. It's a Paul Prater effect. We add our personality into those effects. And if anyone were to do that, it would seem insincere besides us performing it, and I think that's the secret. The bizarre magic really is a secret to the bigger magic, the magic that resonates with people. That makes connections and emotions, that creates an emotional response in the audience. And the most famous magicians who ever lived and the most famous magicians who live today incorporate aspects of that into their performances. If you're wondering why you're still struggling, maybe it reads some into bizarre magic a little bit, or storytelling, narrative, scripting, and things like that. Take a theater class or an improv class. That could help. It does. But the last question of the evening is, where do you see the future of bizarre? Let's start with Paul on that.
Well, I see it continuing to grow. I think that it's going to truly become mainstream. I just think that even when you look at some of the stuff that's on America's Got Talent, I can't remember her name, but the creepy girl, from like Indonesia or whatever. I mean,
Sacred Rihanna. Yeah.
What's that?
Sacred Rihanna.
Yeah, that went like viral, not just among magicians. I think people just want something different that entertains them. So I just see bizarre magic continuing to grow. The one thing that not that we're the gatekeepers to bizarre by any means, but my only concern is that it doesn't become too like so mainstream that it's watered down all over again and turns back into regular magic, if that makes sense. So that's my concern, that we don't have this cycle. And I'm not saying, like, again, we're not the gatekeepers, but we're out there publicly being seen. And I mean, just looking through the list, I know half the people on this, more than half of them, perform as well. So we're the ones who can keep bizarre magic both accessible to the public, but yet bizarre at the same time.
Yep, I agree with that. You know, I think the people performing bizarre well, you know, will prevent that from happening. I don't think it'll ever become watered down as a category or genre or whatever you want to call it. Vlad, what do you think? I hope anyway. Vlad, same question.
I think as long as all of us that choose to walk the path of doing this style of magic respect it, I think we can keep it going and keep an actual foster an interest with it, as long as, you know, it doesn't become throwaway magic. If we respect it and we keep theatricality to it, and we make it worth people coming to see us by being honest to our own brand and clarifying who we are as performers, I think there'll always be an interest in it. And I think no matter what we call it, you know, I call it Gothic, you know, no matter what everybody else calls it, people are choosing to come to see our show because of what we're putting forth. And as long as we still keep in mind what people want to see, and if it's not exactly what they want to see, if we don't target the audience that wants to see what we're creating, then it'll start to peter off. But, you know, as long as we keep the people interested that are, I mean, my stuff, as long as people watch horror films and want to remember things like that, there'll always be an interest. You know, other people, you know, I mean, David's stuff, if David chose, David could go perform either in historical venue or at a university, because all of his things tie together. He's got the history, he's got the theatricality to it, the thoughtfulness, and it's sort of an intelligent magic. You know, Paul, yeah, and Paul's is sort of like, hey, this is rock and roll magic. You know, we're gonna have a good time, but I'm gonna kick your ass, and you're gonna know you came to a show.
Why haven't you show that yet?
And Vince is like, you know what? We're going to open a newspaper and I'm going to tell you what it was like to be on the Titanic.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. And David, the future of
what's the future of bizarre magic? I'm looking forward to being surprised, because the magicians who are influenced by the current crop of bizarre magicians we haven't met yet. So the magician who is asked, who are your influences, and says, well, Paul Prater, we haven't met those magicians yet. And so I'm looking forward to being surprised by all that. You know, that's the next generation who will be influenced by what's happening right now. And who knows what they can accomplish. You know, someone's going to come up with new approaches to this, and that's the excitement of it. You know, it's constantly, the performing arts are organic and alive, and that means they're ever changing. If they ever stop, if they become sort of fossilized, they die. And so that's what's great about, you know, some magicians might lament the fact that, you know, bizarre magic has changed from the days of Doc Shiels and Tony Andruzzi, but that's what's kept it alive, is the fact that it's grown as we grow. And that's how it stays vital and relevant, and that's how surprises happen. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing what the future of bizarre magic is, because it hasn't happened.
And before we move on, I want to comment on what you said about Andruzzi. For those keep quoting Andruzzi about like how it's supposed to be performed, remember Tony Andruzzi was independently wealthy and could perform it however he wanted to. So don't use that as a model.
All over the place.
That's
So,
right.
and no concern about making money off of ticket sales, which was a good thing because it freed him to do what he wanted, for it to be just self-expression. It didn't have to be his job. So that's part of why he could create what he created. He had the freedom to do that just as pure self-expression.
Yeah. It's one of the biggest compliments I got recently was from Vlad, who pointed out something to me. Is like what he really liked about my shows, because he's seen a few of my shows and the full performances and that sort of thing. Most magicians only seen like tidbits of my actual magic and that sort of thing, or what I do at a conference. But he said that he really appreciated the fact that this is funny coming from a vampire, of course, is that he really appreciated the fact. Or Vlad, you want to say what you told me
about the thing I said the other night?
Yeah.
I appreciated that when you watch Vince, when a revelation happens, Vince is able to emote and seem as surprised at the people's choices and what's happening as the people that are viewing it for the very first time. He's able to keep it fresh every time he does it, and he seems like sincerely entertained and surprised when the things happen. And it takes a lot of skill to be able to do that, because after you've done it 300 times, it's not actually that fresh. But when Vince does it, it's like he's seeing it for the very first time every time.
Yeah, it's the illusion of spontaneity.
Yep.
Yeah, even though it's a script and it's been rehearsed, there's the sense that this is happening for the first time.
And it's like Jeff used to do with the Miser's Dream, when he brings the little kid up there, and it's like, all of a sudden with the coin, and he's like going through the motions that coin actually appeared, and it's like Vince is able to do that. It's like, how did you select that name out of this entire bag of previously unknown names?
Well, but this is an important thing, and I think it raises an issue because, and Clifford's right here, I think performing bizarre magic and mentalism to some extent requires an expanded set of acting skills.
Yep. But it's wonderful for us to like watch it in another performer. It's it's like you're sort of like watching, being a violinist, watching another like master violinist. You're like, oh man, like, the tone he got from that, like playing them,
Yeah, and it's because to a larger extent, the visual eye candy of magic isn't as prominent an element in mentalism and bizarre as it is in mainstream magic. So in mainstream magic, you can coast on the visual interest of the magic effect itself. The balls jumping around from cup to cup, or the handkerchiefs being pulled out of the squared circle, or whatever. But in bizarre and in mentalism, the performance is largely taking place inside people's heads. Mm-hmm. And we're actively engaging people's imaginations to fill in the blanks and to connect the dots. And that requires an expanded set of acting skills.
I'll tell you how I'm able to do that and make those connections is because the biggest piece of advice I give magicians is love your audience. Don't do it for you, do it for them. And that makes it easier.
Yeah.
A lot of those reactions I do with the audience are generally sincere, because the first thing I see before I jump into, I can't believe you pick that one, and that sort of thing. The first thing I see is that glimmer of wonder in their eyes when they open that pouch up or unfold the paper, or discover that, and I'm able to make that connection. And
because it is the first time with those people.
it is the first time with
it
them.
is happening for the first time, because that's the value of live theater. It's the product of a time and a place and a particular set of people, and it will never happen exactly that way again. That's its value.
And the thing I like about Paul is that Paul can separate himself from, no matter what they do, he can sort of like go, you know what? I'm going to walk out of the room and you can do whatever you want. And when I come back in, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
It's like sort of like whatever like is going to happen. And let's just see what happens. It's sort of like this, I want to be as hands off as I can. And you just do whatever you want to do with this, and we'll go from there.
That's how I try to get away from the mentalism aspect of I'm smarter and brighter and better than you.
Yeah.
It's not me.
Yeah.
My friend described my Choose Your Own Adventure book.
Like David's sort of like this.
Which is very flattering, I think. Yeah.
And David, the thing I like about David is like sort of like when he performs, it's almost like he has a wider grasp of the knowledge of humanity. It's like sort of like he's almost looking at us like Q.
Wow. I've never seen it from that point of view.
It's sort of like, I'm going to create like this, and we'll just, I'm going to recite humanity, like, and I'm going to tell you about the history of like, the Borgias. But you like recite it sort of like you actually lived part of it.
Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting that you feel that way. Wow. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that was our. I appreciate everyone coming here tonight, and thank you all for joining us. And we definitely got through this again sometime very soon with the same group on a different topic. This was so much fun. And I'm sure we could probably go on for another 2 hours on all these things.
Oh,
but
yeah.
We summoned us here to tell us what card you chose.
That's right. Yep. But for now, thank you everyone for coming tonight. If you're a mainstream magician, bye everyone. If you're a mainstream magician or a bizarrist, let's say this for the mainstream magic out there. Look into bizarre a little bit. Check it out. Don't be afraid of it. It's not horror, blood, and guts. It's about being different and unique, and it's about and I forgot. For me, the future of bizarre magic, less old white guys. I mean,
thank goodness.
Yeah.
I resemble
and different interpretations, new ideas, pushing the envelope, and that sort of thing. Magic can be bizarre magic can be successful. You can make a career out of it. Everyone in this group has made a career of being full-time mainstream bizarre magicians. Aiden Sinclair is for example, I'm sure a lot of people know who that is. He is, he does very, very well at the Stanley Hotel. Is possibly the most successful bizarre magician in the country. It's so it's something to think about. But on that note, oh yeah, you are an old white guy, Rick. But thank you everyone for coming tonight. Thank you again, everyone. Have a good evening, and that's it. Stick around, guys, after I end the broadcast. Bye. There he is. There it is. I was trying to set you up.